can't talk about Hillary Clinton without talking about President Obama. Why do you think that President Obama hasn't held anybody accountable for the IRS, the VA, Health and Human Services Department, Homeland Security, FBI, U.S. Justice Department, NSA, VA? Why?
That's just going to take an hour. Go ahead.
Exactly. Why? Why do you think?
I'm going to answer your question differently. And I'm not trying to duck your question. I'm not. If you go back to 2007, I don't know how many of you were watching me at that time. In 2007, Reverend Jeremiah Wright gave one interview, and it was to me. That was the last time he was ever in the public eye giving an interview. Every single one of my warnings, admonitions, I think about Obama that I made back in 2007 and 2008 has come to fruition. And I've concluded a lot about him. I have studied him, I have read everything that he's written, I've listened to all of his words that in his books, the audio accounts of him. And there's one common denominator about him, and the word that always comes to mind for me is he's radical. He, in my opinion, will go down as one of the single worst presidents in American history. And I'll give you the reasons why I think so. Here's my take on Obama. He's a guy that grew up indoctrinated under Frank Marshall Davis, communist. He's a guy that became friends with the most radical people in Chicago. Reverend Wright, Father Flager. He started his political career in the home of an unrepentant terrorist, Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, sat on boards with him, and gave speeches with the guy. And in 2007 and 2008, does anybody know how many times was he asked about his relationship with Bill Ayers? Does anyone know the answer to that? One time. And he was asked the question because of me. Because George Stephanopoulos was on my radio show the day before he did a debate with Charlie Gibson. And I said, are you going to ask him about Bill Ayers? And George Stephanopoulos said, who's Bill Ayers? So I literally had to feed George Stephanopoulos the question about Bill Ayers, and Obama's answer was, well, it's just some guy in the neighborhood. So as I look at this background of his, there's one thing that Obama has never done. Obama has never deviated from that radicalism to which he was indoctrinated into by some very radical people that he always associated himself with. Now, as much as I make fun of Bill Clinton's a far better politician and far more pragmatic and less rigid than Obama. Think of a sister soldier moment that Barack Obama's ever had. I can't think of one. Or imagine a time if things aren't working out for Barack Obama, has he ever said something similar to, the era of big government is over, or the end of welfare as we know it? That showed to me, Clinton's a smart, shrewd, pragmatic politician, a Southern governor that understood that his inclination to move to the left, that the country wasn't going to adapt to it, so he moderated his positions and really successfully accomplished a lot. When Newt Gingrich came into power in 1994, they actually set up a budget that balanced for 4 consecutive years when the Republicans had control of the purse strings and Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. That was, divided government that worked. I've never seen that in Barack Obama. If anything, he's doubled down. Now he's decided, 22 times he said he didn't have the authority as president to use an executive order to pass, a new immigration law. So he bypasses existing law. He's using an executive order, totally unconstitutional by his own wording, and now says he'll do the same thing on climate change, and he'll bypass the United States Senate when it comes to their advice and consent, and do a deal with the mullahs in Iran, even though 2 weeks ago they were on TV saying death to America, and yesterday said that the destruction of Israel is non-negotiable. That doesn't sound to me like a guy that is capable of transcending his indoctrination. It's almost like the Manchurian Candidate syndrome to me, right? So Well, I think, it presents a problem, because now we have 20 million more people in poverty, 20 million more people on food stamps. You have him wanting to make legal 11 million people in the hopes that they're going to vote Democrat, which is, I think, one of the big reasons they want to legalize people, and alter and dramatically shift the voting base in the country. So I think he's bad for the Constitution, bad for the rule of law. I think he's been bad for the economy. 92 million Americans out of work, all those people in poverty and food stamps, and now we have chaos and literally a Mideast that 10 years from now could have mullahs in Iran with the Obama seal of approval on a nuclear weapon. That scares the living shit out of me. That is bad for humanity. That is bad for the world. And I didn't even mention the Ukraine or Crimea, as we discussed earlier. So so forget about all the scandals. My take on him is he is a radical, rigid ideologue, incapable of adaptation or change or any type of negotiation, even with Republicans.